Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am really excited to share my conversation today with Barbara Guterman. She is a seasoned entrepreneur. In fact, she's been an entrepreneur for over 33 years. She has launched companies and managed businesses in a variety of industry segments. Few, and we'll get into the story here in a second, include telecommunications, retail, franchising, manufacturing, fine jewelry, and also an internet-based startup. She is a passionate business executive. She's, of course, a veteran to being a community organizer, and she has a true desire to create powerful change. Welcome to the show today, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Selena. It's so lovely to be with you.
I'm excited to dive in. You have such an incredible background. I'm in awe. It's amazing story. So let's start at the beginning, so to speak, ish. Where are you from? Talk about, education, that kind of good stuff. Where'd you go to college? Why'd you go there? And then take us through your career path.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I currently am living in the Washington, D.C. area, but I'm not a Washingtonian. I'm actually a true Florida girl. And I grew up in the South in the Tampa, St. Pete area and wanted to stay close to home for college. My father had just passed away, and so it was important to stay close to mom. And so I did my undergraduate work at the University of Florida, go Gators, where I studied broadcasting. My major was broadcast news, and it was my hope at the time to be a television news reporter like Barbara Walters or like Diane Sawyer. And it was clear to me upon graduating that there were just a few opportunities at that time for women in that industry. It was before cable television. It was before the proliferation of other news outlets. And I knew that was going to be kind of a tough, long, steep hill to climb to get to the top. And I also believe that the journalism forefathers at the broadcasting school, the School of Communications, saw what was happening in the industry. And it was 1984, 1985, right around the time of the breakup of the Bell system, if anybody recalls that, also known as divestiture, where the federal government was breaking up AT&T and the baby Bells. And so the journalism forefathers thought, wow, there's going to be a lot of opportunities here. And so maybe we can give these kids who are graduating the opportunity to either say broadcasting or telecommunications. And so looking at the future and wanting to have as many options as possible, I chose to put telecommunications on my degree and not broadcasting. And so that opened up a whole array of possibilities for me when I went out into the workforce as a undergraduate. Mm-hmm. And so, what do college graduates do? They sit on their parents' couches and complain. And that's what I did. And my mom said, do something. And so I answered an ad in the newspaper for a quote unquote telecommunications specialist and ended up selling my very first job. The first time and only time I ever worked for anyone else was the very first job that I took in long distance sales for a company at the time, which was called American Pioneer Telephone. And I knew that I could sell my way out of a paper bag. And so I thought, I'm going to get some experience with my telecommunications degree. And I ended up being at that company for a little less than a year, but I was kind of the top salesperson from the day that I arrived until the day that I left. And on my way out, and the reason I left was because I was taking a look at the landscape and working with my customers, and they were saying, wow, look at all these opportunities deregulation is bringing, and sure would be great if we had the same competitive options in local service that are now available in long distance. At the time, AT&T was beginning to have competition with the likes of companies called MCI and Sprint, and yet the local phone companies had no competition, and that was coming. And so seeing that writing on the wall and listening to my customers, which I think is a very key component in any business, is listening to your customers. I brought that information back to the CEO of that company and said, look, this is what I'm hearing on the street. This is the direction I think this company needs to pivot. And he said to me, that is not the business we're in. And so I listened carefully, and he said no, but that didn't mean the answer was no. That meant the answer was no for him. And so one of the engineers that I had been working with on some of the larger deals that I was closing had some engineering background and history with local phone companies. And we were commiserating. And I said, hey, is it possible to do such a thing as building a competitive local phone company? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, it is. And I've been thinking about that for years. And now there might be an opportunity based on the regulations opening up. And so I said to him, well, if you can design it and engineer it, I know that I could get some seed money, and I know that I could sell it. So what do you think? And so several months later, after lots of planning and strategizing, our company, Intermediate Communications at the time was what it was called, was born on the back of a napkin in a coffee shop near the company that we both had just decided to leave together. And that was the beginning of launching one of the very first nation's competitive local phone companies. And I could tell you at that time, I was 23 years old, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I also had no idea at that moment that together we would be leaving our mark on history. But that's indeed what happened. And so, of course, in an effort to gain as much knowledge as I could about this industry that I was jumping 2 feet into, but not knowing much about, I was reading as much as I could get my hands on. And I read an article about a gentleman in Washington, D.C., who had started the nation's first competitive local phone company. And so I put down the magazine, I picked up my phone, and I called him right on the spot. And his secretary answered, and I said, may I please speak with Mr. Scott Brody? And she said, well, junior or senior. And then I started to sweat because the article hadn't said junior or senior. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go for the old guy. And moments later, he was on the phone. And I said to him, are you the gentleman that I just read about on the cover of Telecommunications Week? And he said, yes. So he was obviously very busy and irritated by my call. And I said, well, I am so excited to meet you because I want to have a company just like the one you started in Washington. But don't worry, I'm here in Florida. I won't be competing with you. And he laughed, told me he was very busy, and said he had to go. And I pleaded with him. I said, wait, can I just ask you one more question before you hang up? And he agreed. And then I said, if you had a daughter who had a dream and you weren't here to help her realize it, wouldn't you hope someone else would? And he said, well, of course. And I said, well, my father died many years ago, and I could sure use your help with my big dream. And at that moment, he agreed to see me. And within days, I was in his office with the business plan, and he agreed to come on board as one of my first mentors and on my first board of directors. And that's kind of how the vision of the business was launched. And so one of the things I talk about all the time in my journey and in talking with other young entrepreneurs is the notion of being fearless. And what I mean when I say fearless is not that you are lacking fear, because we're always fearful. What I mean by that is taking action in the face of fear, not letting anything stop you and moving forward regardless of your fear, just ignoring it and moving through it. And so after meeting with Mr. Brody and understanding the real power of mentors and mentorship, I quickly learned that that wasn't enough. In addition to fearless, one has to have an unstoppable singular focus. And he was very instrumental in helping me kind of reorganize myself so that I could put a plan in place to launch this telephone company that would gain the attention of others. And so as a mentor, he actually did nothing for me except tell me what I needed to do for myself. And kind of prodded me along the way every step. And one of the things he did was suggest that I attend a conference. So where some of the early investors in this new emerging industry were going to be. And so, in fact, I did. I attended the conference. He pointed out these two investment bankers that were at the end of the hall, and he said, Barbara, you need to meet those two men. And so I paraded down the hall. With false confidence, but no one knew that but me. And, swiftly handed my business card to this tall gentleman in a Brooks Brothers suit. And I said to him, you don't know me yet, but I promise you will. And I turned to walk away. And I did not introduce myself, but I was hoping that I had intrigued them enough so that when I called in the future, they would want to meet with me. And indeed, that's what happened. I followed up with a phone call the next day. And I said, I'm the tall young woman that you met in the hallway of the Hilton Hotel. I'm going to be in New York tomorrow. What time can you meet me? And just between you and I had no plans to be in New York tomorrow, but they didn't know that. And the response was almost immediately 2 p.m., but we will need your business plan first, okay? So this was before emails. I couldn't email it. And so I raced around town to get my actual hard copy business plan on the last FedEx jet out from the cargo airport at the Tampa International Airport to get my business plan there before I arrived the next day. And when I arrived, it was a terrifying moment. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But I found my way to the 24th floor where I became a guest in this large mahogany panel conference room. And there were two investment bankers, the gentlemen who I had met in the hallway. And they were playing good cop, bad cop with me. One was throwing knives, the other was cleaning up the blood. And they were almost there to like eat me alive. But this was my Shark Tank moment, and I was going to take advantage of it. So I sat down and I said, I'm here to ask for a $10 million investment to build the first competitive local phone company in Florida. And their reaction was very swift. And they almost laughed me out of the building, but I just listened and listened. And they said the following: good idea, kid, but go find someone with more years of financial management experience than you have years of age, and then come back and talk to us. Oh. Right? So I wasn't sure what part to be startled by most, but what I do remember about their comment was that they did not say no. Yeah. They did not say, no, you don't have a good idea here. They said, no, you don't have enough experience. But that was something that I could fix. Yeah. And so I left that boardroom. I took their advice, and I came home and realized that if I was going to get this company off the ground really, that I was going to have to be flexible enough to put my ego aside and to do what was best for the company. And if Wall Street was looking for experience with my good idea, so be it. And so I did exactly that. I actually approached my old boss from the company that I had left to ask him if he wanted to come join me in my new company. And he did. He agreed. Wow. He wanted to be a part of it. Now, keep in mind, how many I was 24 at the time now, 24-year-olds can approach, a middle-aged man and say, hey, come on board with me now. He thought I was some crazy kid just a year earlier. So he joined the company and introduced me to some of his friends who he had worked with in the industry. And one of them was a gentleman who completely fit the bill. He had 25 years of management experience, both in finance, also in telephony, telecommunications. And I brought him on board, and he was exactly who Wall Street was looking for. And together, over the next several years, we redid the business plan, we built a management team, and we closed very quickly on our first round of venture capital financing. And that first round was about $5.2 million, which doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but it was clearly a very good start for us at the time. And what might be unbelievable to note is that for that first $5.2 million, we actually had to give up control of our company.
Yeah.
Well over control, which again is where most entrepreneurs, I think, fail to oftentimes see the bigger picture that could be represented if they're willing to just look at alternatives. And so we actually had to give away 70% of the company right up front, but we would not have had a company knowing the amount of capital we needed to raise if we didn't do that.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of how things started.
Okay, hold on, Barbara. Hold on.
Yeah.
I have goosebumps. Like this is such an incredible story. Like, have you written a book yet?
I'm actually in the process of writing a book.
Oh,
and
good.
The fun fact about the book is the woman who's helping me write the book, I met through Hera Hub.
Nice. Yay.
Yay.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm like so riveted right now, Barbara. This is like, you have to turn this book into a movie. Seriously. I like see it playing out in front of me as you're telling your story. It's incredible.
Well, not all books have happy endings, right? And so this one did not either. And so with this beautiful management team and with our initial round of funding, we were able to grow and grow and grow. Together, we continued to build our network infrastructure and competitive phone company networks throughout Florida and the Southeast, acquiring companies along the way, raising billions of dollars in equity and debt along the way. I did say billions. And we quickly became a Wall Street darling. And 7 years after this gentleman joined me to grow the company, my company was the first competitive local phone company to go public in the nation. And we actually took the company public on my 30th birthday on the NASDAQ exchange. And I thought it was going to be this huge momentous occasion. And as you know, by NASDAQ, at that time, there was no NASDAQ floor. There was nothing. Yeah. And I just remember walking around a conference room table, signing some papers. It was a little anticlimactic, but nonetheless,
no standing on the
nothing.
Oh.
We were the first competitive local phone company to go public and continued to grow thereafter. And so over the period of the next 15 years, the company grew and grew and grew through acquisition and organically. And we became so attractive that we were an acquisition target ourselves. And so there weren't too many companies that could acquire us based on the amount of revenue and debt that we also had. And so the logical target for our acquisition was a company by the name of WorldCom, which some people may know. For not such good reason. But WorldCom purchased my company in the year 2000. I left the company in 1998 and retired to move on to do other community activism type of things. But nonetheless, the company was acquired. I was still a major shareholder by WorldCom. And unfortunately, it was a Cinderella story until it wasn't, because 2 years after the acquisition, WorldCom declared bankruptcy at the hands of its founder under very dark, fraudulent types of business practices, and took not only my company, but all of the 5,000 employees down with it. And so although I had been gone and my personal name was not associated with the company's demise, it was truly a very difficult time for so many people. It did not have a happy ending, but while we were there, we did a lot of really, really good things.
Wow. So incredible, Barbara. I'm like, I wanted... Yeah.
One thing I'll note is, when it was probably 13, 14 years after that boardroom conversation where I had asked for $10 million to start building the company was actually acquired for $6 billion. And so I say to a lot of entrepreneurs who, are unwilling to potentially give away control or give up a significant piece of their business to ultimately see it grow well beyond what they could individually have it grow to. But my mother always said to me that a small piece of something great is better than a big piece of nothing. And in fact, that is so true. And I think in the entrepreneurial world, when you surround yourself with experts that help you grow your vision and your business beyond what you could do yourself, that there's enough to go around.
Absolutely. My goodness, so many questions I want to ask, but I want to make sure we have time to get to some of the other amazing things that you've focused your attention on over the years. Maybe just give us a few of the highlights, some of the things that you've done. Again, I know you've been incredibly involved in the community, and maybe even tell us the story. How'd you end up in Washington from Florida, since you're such a Florida girl?
Right. Well, it's a funny story. I spent 15 years working, and really didn't have a personal life at all. My sister lived up here in Washington and met this guy, and she wanted me to go on a blind date. So I said no. I wasn't sure, but I ultimately agreed, ended up going on a blind date, and my husband proposed that night. Being cautious, did not accept his proposal until the very next day. But that was love at first sight. And I moved up here to Washington to be with him and his son, who was 10 years old at the time and had just lost his mom to breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So I became an instant mom overnight, and we had children of our own shortly thereafter. And one of our sons very early on as a toddler and even younger was having significant communication problems and delays developmentally and so on. And so we realized that there was a problem there. And by the time we realized there was a problem, we already had our second baby, only to find out that both of our children had significant developmental delays and communications challenges. And so I had to make a decision at that moment that my personal life, my business life was going to be put on hold, but that I was going to use every skill that I had ever learned as an executive to pull my children through the darkest times of their lives. And so I became, for the next 8 years, the self-appointed CEO of my children. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping that I could put a business plan of therapy and intervention in place so that I could recover them. And that's where my career, business-wise, took a little sharp left turn, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. And today they are 19 and 21 and on their way. One of them's on his way to American University to be a teacher. The other one is a junior at the George Washington University studying business. And so completely worked. Being the CEO of your children, I think, is a good job every day. So luckily, we are on the lucky side of the equation. We were able to help them through their most difficult times. But when I knew that there would be a light at the end of the tunnel, I re-entered the workforce differently, not on a big corporate scale, but in smaller ways where I thought I could make a difference, and ended up being a co-owner of a retail store, where I learned, the ins and outs of retail, and we began franchising that store, and became the CEO of the franchise company. We began manufacturing our own clothing, so I understood and began to learn the manufacturing industry as well. And so, my talk to entrepreneurs, when I talk with them, I tell them, look, if you have skills, you can do just about anything. If you're willing to learn a new process, you can learn a new business. And so I've always been wanting to kind of just jump in and learn as I go, kind of learn to swim your way to the top. But it's always been a great adventure. And so after manufacturing and franchising and retail, I found myself for a little bit in fine jewelry. But one of the companies that I loved working on the most was a little company called Find a Cure, where we were one of the first companies after the Lance Armstrong Yellow Live Strong band. We created our first band called Live Long, which was pink for breast cancer, and partnered with the City of Hope Breast Cancer Research Hospital and raised a ton of money for them, and just had a really good time. And that was what we called a cause marketing company at that time. And then some of the other companies that I was working with were sold to online retailers. And so that's where my internet-based company comes from as well.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, so much, so much to dive into here. I have so many questions, but I want to, again talk about. I know that you're focused on something that's called Teach, Give, Inspire Fridays. So I want to
Yes,
make sure
yes.
we have a minute to talk about that.
I'm happy to talk about
Okay.
Teach, Give, Inspire Fridays. It really grew out of my desire to reconnect. As you can imagine, when I took myself out of the equation to raise my children, it was an all-consuming endeavor. And in so doing, there were so many things, people, relationships that got left behind. And yet, when I was out there, I would hear, "Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you?" And always in our life, we're walking by people, we're smiling at them, they're smiling at us. But without that next question, like, "Oh, what is it? What do you do?" Or "How is your family?" Or "What is going on?" You really don't get to know people, and they don't get to know you. And so in my desire to reconnect and to make a difference in my community, I decided that I would start a women's speakers platform called TGIF, which stands for Teach, Give, Inspire Fridays, and that we would bring together women who could have a voice and empower one another on a really meaningful level about deeper and truer connection. And so the objective initially was to get beyond, "Hi, how are you?" and to ask that next question and to empower women to know that there's so much more that we have to offer one another and to truly lift one another up. And so we are in our second year of Teach, Give, Inspire Fridays. We ended up needing to go virtual earlier in March. Our last in-person event was March 6th. But each event we have 3 speakers who, one is a teach speaker teaching us something powerful that women may not be thinking about. The second speaker is a give speaker who talks about an extraordinary way of giving back to the community. And the third speaker is someone who inspires us with a story of resilience or the hero's journey or an empowering message that can help all women better themselves, their families, and their communities. And so Teach, Give, Inspire has touched nearly 1,000 women in person, and we continue monthly to have a TGIFV, our virtual conversations now happening over Zoom, and they're also very, very powerful. And the nice thing about the virtual platform, as you know, is that you're now not limited to your local geographic area for attendees. And so we've been able to have attendees participate on our calls from all over the country. But the main objective really outside of our business scope is really just to empower women to be their best selves, for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and then to go out and make a difference themselves. And to give you an idea of some of the speakers we've had, one of our speakers was a woman who heads an organization called Extraordinary Birthdays, and she has been able to put in place an organization that provided over 900 birthdays to homeless children. Wow. And if you think about it, how often have you thought about, I wonder what that homeless child is going to do for their birthday? We're not thinking about that. And so the idea was to bring into our consciousness things that we might not be thinking about that we can then focus on and understand how we all can help better our communities.
Incredible. My goodness. And I also see something here, OTG Baby. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I do a lot of entrepreneurial consulting, and one of the companies that I'm working with now is a company by the name of OTG Baby, which stands for On the Go Baby. And On the Go Baby grew out of a high school Shark Tank program where this young group of kids won their Shark Tank at their private high school, and they were granted $10,000 to produce this product. And the product is a portable diaper changing station that is safe, clean, and fashionable, and you take it with you on the go. It's really a proprietary, looks like a backpack, but when you open it up, it's actually a full changing station, and opens up kind of like an egg, and so the child lays out on the whole thing. But what's so lovely about it is the young kids who were part of the project, my son was one of them, and I was their mentor and advisor. had no interest in continuing the project after they went to college. And my son said, Mom, we really have something here. What do you think about it? And I said, well, I'm happy to continue to mentor you. And so he's continued. He's the CEO of the company. And since then, they have gotten a patent for this wonderful product. And, it's passed all the Consumer Product Safety Commission standards. So we've selected a manufacturer, and the new improved bag should be coming off the line early September. So hopefully with the COVID baby, outbreak that we will see, that will be a wonderful time to launch a new baby product into the market. But the way that I was working with my son, and the way that I really enjoy working with other entrepreneurs, is helping them get from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, whatever that looks like. And oftentimes it's not even a lack of resources, but a lack of know-how. And so just like I was mentored and helped along the way, my goal now is to give back and to help and mentor other entrepreneurs to take the next steps for themselves.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Barbara, I could talk to you all day. Well, let me ask the book, when is it going to be out? When can we buy this?
Well, I'm going to be working on it this summer. We have some time now that we're all spending more time indoors. So I'm hoping within the next year, but I will keep you posted.
Okay. Well, we do have a summer writing challenge that's kicking off, a global writing challenge for Hera Hub, June 22nd through the end of July. So
I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, I'll make sure Julia shares that info with you. I'll send you a follow-up email on it as well. But yeah, it's a great way to just have a little extra accountability to other folks that are working on.
That's exactly what we all need, a little structure to get from A to B.
Exactly. Well, Barbara, it's been such a pleasure connecting with you, getting to know you. If our listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can reach me directly through my website at barbaraguterman.com, or at the Teach, Give, Inspire Fridays website as well. And that email will go to both.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you, Felina. My honor. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.